They say Bigfoot is just a myth, but I saw him with my own eyes. It happened in November, deep in the Appalachian wilderness of West Virginia. I've hunted these woods for over 20 years, but that day, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was wrong. No birds, no wind. Just an eerie stillness that made every instinct in me scream, something's out there and it's watching me. Then came the signs. Claw marks 10 feet high on tree trunks. Footprints bigger than any man could make. And then vanish. At night I heard footsteps around my tent, and the strangest part, a haunting hum, like a song coming from all directions. What I found wasn't some wild beast. In the mouth of a forgotten cave, I came face to face with a creature nearly 8 feet tall. Not raging, not aggressive, just aware. Its eyes locked on mine, and I swear I understood the message. Don't come any closer. I made it out alive, and I didn't stay quiet. I brought back proof, clear photos, audio recordings, strands of hair. People say I'm crazy. I say there's something out there. And it's not hiding out of fear. It's hiding out of respect. If you think Bigfoot is just a bedtime story, let me tell you I did too. Until I met him. The first thing I noticed wasn't the cold, it was the silence. Not the peaceful kind you get when snow blankets a place, or when you're deep enough in the woods that even the wind forgets how to whistle. No. This was different. It was wrong. Like the whole forest was holding its breath. Like something had told it not to make a sound. I stepped out of my truck just before noon that day, parked on a gravel turnout off a forgotten road in Randolph County, West Virginia. The kind of road where no one's driven in weeks. Rust-colored leaves were soaked through and pressed flat against the dirt like old blood. Fog crept low along the tree line, clinging to everything, cold and wet. The kind of November where the air clutches your bones before you've even zipped your coat. I'd hunted these hills since I was 16, but not like this, not alone, not since Evelyn passed. I wasn't out here for meat. Let's be honest. I wasn't even out here for peace. I came because I needed to be somewhere that didn't ask anything of me. Somewhere that didn't remind me every second that she was gone. Out here, I didn't have to smile when people gave me that look. The one they think is kind, but feels like pity soaking through your skin. The pack was heavy on my back, but familiar. My boots found old instinct on the path, even if the path itself was half swallowed by roots and rot. I followed the creek like I always had, tracing the bends with a kind of reverence, like a man walking into church. After 2 miles, I found the spot, Tinonul, flat enough for a tent, dry enough to keep the cold from gnawing up through the ground. The same place she and I had set up camp in '89, the same place we'd laughed so hard when the raccoons stole our breakfast. I set up camp slow. Not because I was tired, though I was, but because the silence made every motion feel louder than it should. No squirrels, no crows, no damn woodpeckers hammering away. I waited for some rustle in the brush, for the drip of water from a branch. Nothing. Just my breathing and the soft scrape of canvas as I pitched the tent. When I bent down to hammer the last stake, my wallet slipped from my chest pocket. A photo fluttered out and landed face up in the leaves. Evelyn. She was 27 in that photo, smiling with her hand shading her eyes from the sun. I remember that day. She'd made me promise we'd come back every year. We never did, not after the second miscarriage. But I kept the photo with me like it was an apology I hadn't said out loud. I tucked it back into the wallet and looked up. Across the creek, maybe 20 yards out, something moved. Not fast, just enough to catch the corner of my eye. A shape, tall, still. I froze, squinted, blinked. Nothing. Maybe it was fog twisting between the trees, playing tricks on a man who hadn't slept well in weeks. Maybe I wanted to see something, wanted to believe something out here could make me feel again, even fear. At least fear was alive. I stood there a while, long enough for the cold to bite through the flannel at my wrists. Then I shook it off, moved to the fire ring, and started stacking kindling. That's when I saw the tree. A white oak, thick, scarred with age, standing just behind my tent. About 8 feet up, 3 long slashes tore through the bark. Clean, deep. Each one maybe the width of a hunting knife. But no blade I know could reach that high without a ladder. No bear I've ever tracked made marks like that either. These weren't wild scratches, these were deliberate. I reached up, barely able to touch the lowest edge of the top gash. I'm 6'1". Whatever did this was bigger, or standing on something. But there weren't broken branches beneath. No mud, no prints. Just those 3 marks. 3 lines like a warning written in a language I didn't understand. A wind came then. The first real sound I'd heard in hours. Not strong. Just enough to make the leaves whisper, as if the trees were starting to gossip now that I'd noticed something they didn't want me to see. I lit the fire before dark fully settled. The light danced across the trees, pushing the shadows back just far enough to feel temporary safety. The flames crackled, but they didn't chase away the feeling that something was listening. At 3:33 p.m. I checked my watch, not because I needed the time, but because something in my gut told me to. That old hunter's instinct, the kind you stop trusting after suburbia makes you soft. But the second hand wasn't moving, dead, just frozen at 3:33. I tapped the face, nothing. Hell, maybe the cold got to it. Maybe it was coincidence. But later, when that number came back again, in ways I can't explain, I'd remember that quiet little warning, locked in the ticking that never ticked. Night came early. The kind of black that makes you feel blind even with your eyes wide open. I sat by the fire, fingers tight around a tin cup of instant coffee, listening for anything. A coyote, a fox, the creak of deer hooves on old pine. Still nothing. That's when I realized what I hadn't heard all day. Bird song. Not once. Not even a chickadee. And in this part of the Appalachians, even in November, there's always something in the canopy. But it was like the sky itself was empty. Like even the birds had flown from something older, darker, and too patient to chase. I crawled into my tent around 10. The fire was still smoldering, casting soft shadows against the fabric. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the sound of my heartbeat louder than anything outside. Sleep didn't come easy. Maybe it never really came, because somewhere between the fire's last crackle and the first breath of dawn fog, I heard it. A noise, not footsteps, not claws, something quieter, like cloth dragging or fur brushing canvas, then nothing. I stayed still, held my breath until my lungs ached. The quiet came back heavier than before. Like it had teeth. I reached for my Remington. My hand trembled as it wrapped around the stock. It wasn't the kind of fear that makes you run. It was the kind that makes you listen so hard your ears ring. I waited. Eventually, the silence stretched long enough that I let the rifle rest beside me again. But I didn't sleep. Not really. Not with the memory of that shadow by the creek still pressed into the back of my mind like a thumbprint on wet glass. Morning would come soon. And with it, a different kind of trail. But that night, that silence, it was the first sign. The forest wasn't breathing. Because something else was. It rained that night. Not a gentle drizzle or a calming patter. It came in waves. Cold, heavy, slicing through the dark like a slow-motion avalanche. The kind of rain that seems to fall sideways, hitting your tent like 1,000 fingers trying to claw their way in. I'd forgotten what Appalachian rain felt like in November. Sharp, unrelenting, bone-soaking. And yet somehow, even in the storm, the forest remained quiet. Too quiet. Like the rain had swallowed everything but the sound of itself. By morning, the world outside my tent was nothing but gray. I stepped out into ankle-deep sludge, boots sinking with a sickening squish. The fog hadn't lifted. In fact, it was thicker than the day before, hanging low like a warning. My breath came out in little clouds, swirling before vanishing into the wet air. I stretched my back, cracked my neck, tried to shake off the ache that had settled into my spine, and then I saw them. Dirt, mud, leaves. But pressed into the earth just beyond the fire pit, a trail. A series of impressions too clean to be erosion, too spaced to be a bear, and far too big to be human. I stood there for a long while, squinting, half expecting my eyes to correct themselves, but the prints didn't change. They didn't fade away. They were real. Each one was maybe 16, 17 inches long. Flat 5 toes, no claws, no shoe tread. Just a deep heel, a long arch, and a wide splay at the toes, like something walking barefoot. But the size, it was wrong. The stride too long, the depth too heavy. Whatever made them was taller than any man I've ever met, and it didn't walk like something on 4 legs, it walked like me. I dropped to one knee, reached down, touched the edge of the closest one. The mud was compacted, thick, and still damp underneath. Recent. Maybe hours ago. Which meant whatever it was, it had come through after the rain started. Probably in the middle of the night. While I was asleep. Or pretending to be. I followed the prints step by careful step, tracing the trail through the trees. They cut a clean path through the underbrush, bending saplings like they were grass. No meandering, no hesitation, just forward. Purposeful, steady, like it knew exactly where it was going. Then, nothing. The prints just stopped, dead in the middle of a clearing. No fade out, no sign of turning. One step, then nothing. Like the thing vanished into thin air. I turned in a slow circle, eyes scanning the trees, the canopy, the moss-covered rocks. Nothing broken above, no scrape, no sound, just that dead air pressing in again. I knelt down, reached out, pressed my palm into where the last step had been. Half hoping to feel something. A vibration, a warmth, anything. But the only thing I felt was the weight of my own heartbeat thudding against my ribs. I headed back to camp, slower this time. Every gust of wind felt like a whisper against my neck. Every twig snap, even my own, made my stomach twist. I told myself it could have been a bear. Maybe someone in snowshoes, maybe even a prank, though who the hell would hike out this far in freezing rain just to mess with an old man? But the gut doesn't lie. And mine was screaming. By dusk, the rain had faded to mist. I patched up the tent, boiled some coffee, didn't even bother with dinner. Appetite was gone. Something had shifted. The woods weren't just silent anymore, they were watching. The fire danced weaker than the night before, like it too felt smaller under whatever shadow hung above us. I kept my rifle close this time, laid it across my knees and stared into the dark. Every so often I'd glance at the trees. Every shadow looked like something standing just beyond the firelight, still, tall, waiting. Somewhere past midnight the wind changed. Not direction, tone. The air didn't move through the trees anymore, it pushed, like a pressure change before a storm, like something big exhaling into the woods. I sat up, held my breath, listened, and then came the sound. A drag, like canvas catching on something sharp, then a scrape. Slow, steady, metal against fabric, not a tear. A deliberate stroke like claws or nails or something testing the skin of the tent. I didn't move, didn't even blink. The sound circled, slow. One side of the tent, then the other, then silence. But not the kind I'd gotten used to. This one had shape, intent, like the quiet was part of whatever was out there. I reached for the recorder in my coat pocket, one of those small voice memos I used to leave notes when I didn't feel like writing. Clicked it on with my thumb, slipped it beside my sleeping bag out of sight. Then I waited. No footsteps, no breath, just tension. And time. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember waking up, soaked in sweat, the air inside the tent damp and stinking of panic. I sat up, heart hammering, grabbed the recorder. My hands shook as I rewound the tape. Play, at first just static. The fire crackling in the background, my breathing, then something else, a sound that didn't belong. Whispers, not speech, not anything I could recognize as language. Just low, stretched out syllables, not human, but close, too close. Like something trying to mimic a voice, but forgetting how mouths work. It went on for 10 seconds, then stopped, then a single thud, then nothing. I played it back 3 more times, same result. Outside, the fog had thickened. My boots squelched in the dirt as I stepped out, shotgun in hand, eyes scanning for prints. But there were none. No drag marks, no snapped twigs, no claw marks on the tent. And yet something had been there, had stood outside my tent, had circled, listened, spoken. I didn't eat that morning, didn't make coffee. Just packed my bag slower than usual, rifle always within reach. I wasn't leaving yet. I couldn't, not until I understood what the hell I was really looking at out here. But something told me, this wasn't just some animal wandering too close to camp. No, this was different. Because whatever it was, it had been watching long before I ever knew it was there, and now it wanted me to know. I moved east up the slope just after sunrise. Something about the way the fog shifted behind me the night before made it clear I couldn't stay in that hollow. It was like sleeping in the mouth of something too big to see all at once. So I packed light, left the tent behind, just grabbed my rifle, the recorder, and enough food for a day's walk. My boots were still wet from the night rain, but I didn't care. I needed higher ground. I needed to see. The ridgeline to the east wasn't steep, but it was dense. Pines so tall they leaned like old men with secrets. Wet needles made the climb slick, and half the time I could barely hear my own steps. Just the soft crunch of frost breaking under weight. But somewhere along the way I realized I was walking quieter than usual. Not because I was trying to sneak, but because something in me knew I wasn't alone anymore. It started with that itch. The one at the base of your neck, the one you can't shake no matter how many times you look behind you. That old primal buzz telling you you're being watched. And I don't mean maybe, I mean definitely. The kind of stare you feel like heat. Direct, focused, measured. I stopped near a tree scarred by lightning, white bark stripped clean down one side, leaned my back against it, exhaled slow, let the cold settle in my lungs. Then I waited. 10 seconds passed, 20, then I heard it. A step. Not a random branch break, not wind. A step. Heavy. Rhythmical. One. Then pause. Then another. Pacing me. I spun fast, aimed the rifle down toward the brush where the sound had come from. Nothing. But I swear, just before I turned, I'd seen something shift. Not move. Shift. Like it had been standing there already, blending. I lowered the rifle, heart pounding too hard for stillness, and walked on, this time slower. Ears tuned, it followed, kept distance but never too far. Like it wanted me to know, like it had chosen to be heard now. Then came the whistle, low, long, deep enough to vibrate through the trees. A sound no bird ever made, not human either. A tone that held a shape, like a call. And just like that, the entire forest froze. No wind, no creaks, not even the drip of water from the branches above. Just that thick, pressing quiet again. But worse now, like it had rules, like it had purpose, like it had learned when to speak and when not to. I pressed forward, breath sharp, muscles tight. Didn't realize how clenched my jaw had gotten till it started to ache. Then I saw it, a structure, hidden off the trail, just beneath a slope where the ferns grew thick and undisturbed. Pine branches bent and woven together almost like a blind. But this wasn't natural. This wasn't the work of wind or deer. This was built, intentional. Tied off with dry grass and thin strips of bark, a hunting perch. Except no hunter I've ever met builds something 8 feet off the ground with no ladder, no platform, and no camouflage. It was a lookout, and it hadn't been built for a man. Beneath it, the ground was packed down. Wide, flat prints sunken deep into the moss, but with enough definition left to see the same foot shape I'd found yesterday. Human-like, but enormous. Around it, crushed needles, broken branches about shoulder height to me, and long, hair-thin claw lines scratched into the bark. I stepped back, breath hitching, then turned and scanned the tree line again. Still nothing. Still that weight in the air like gravity had thickened. I reached for the notebook in my coat pocket, sat down on a cold rock and started sketching the layout, the prints, the shelter, the trail leading in. I marked trees, the incline, the elevation, everything. Not because I needed the map, because I needed to know I wasn't losing my damn mind. I kept writing. Even when my hands started to shake, I wrote like it would save me, like if I could trap it on paper it couldn't reach me. I don't know why. Maybe that's how the mind copes when it knows something out there sees you as prey. That's when I saw the carving, on a stone by the base of a cedar tree, half covered in moss like it hadn't been touched in years. But the lines were fresh, angular, not letters, not numbers, just a symbol, 3 prongs branching out from a center point. Deep, deliberate. I reached out, traced it with one finger. The stone was ice cold, colder than anything else around it. That's when I felt it again. That stare, but this time I didn't turn. I stood up slow. Let the weight of my pack settle. I didn't raise my rifle, didn't run, just walked. Back down the slope, calm, even steps. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I knew somehow if I ran, I wouldn't make it out. The woods didn't breathe the whole way back. By the time I reached my campsite, the fire pit was full of cold ash, and the tent sagged like it hadn't been touched in years. I crawled inside, knees stiff, pulled the zipper up halfway. Then I took out my notebook. I wrote for 2 hours. Maps, thoughts, a list of everything I'd seen. I drew the symbol again, this time sharper, like it might mean something if I got the shape just right. Then I picked up the recorder, hit play. Listened to the sounds from the night before. That whisper, the thud, the low vibration under it all. I listened to it over and over until I could hear it without the device. It wasn't random. It was layered, structured, a signal. That was the night I stopped pretending this was just nature behaving strangely. That was the night I realized I wasn't out here to hunt. I was being observed, and whatever was doing it, had done this before. The next morning I found another print. Not near the fire, not near the trail, but 5 feet behind my tent. Perfect, clear, fresh, and facing toward me. Not walking, standing, watching. The hunter had become the hunted, and somehow, it was just getting started. It started just after sundown, while I was sitting beside what was left of the fire, chewing on jerky that tasted like leather soaked in creek water. I hadn't spoken a word in over a day, not out loud. My voice had started to feel foreign in my own throat. Everything around me felt like it was listening, like the trees had ears, like the fog remembered things I hadn't even said yet. That night I heard something I'll never forget. Not a growl, not a howl. It wasn't even a scream. It was singing, long drawn-out tones, echoing, deep, like a whale call dragged through a mountain tunnel. The kind of sound that vibrated more in your chest than your ears. It started low, maybe 100 yards out. Then another one answered it, farther off, a slightly higher pitch bending upward at the end like it was asking something. Then another, somewhere behind me, then one more, closer, too close. So close it made my bones feel hollow. I didn't move, didn't blink. Just stared into the dark, heart hammering like it was trying to dig its way out. The song didn't stop. It pulsed, like breath, like ritual. And the worst part wasn't the sound itself. It was the silence in between, the way the woods held their breath, the way it made you realize just how loud the quiet had been until now. I stood up slow, careful not to make the fire pop. The light barely reached past the tree trunks, just flickers on wet bark. I turned off the recorder. I didn't want this sound trapped. I didn't want it to follow me home in my pocket. Then I saw the structure, downhill from camp, maybe 70 yards, hidden behind a curtain of twisted branches. I don't know how I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe it hadn't been there, or maybe it didn't want to be seen. But now, in the dark, lit by the last dying embers, it glowed faintly, not with light, but with presence. I grabbed the flashlight, clicked it on. The beam trembled in my hand. At first glance, it looked like a pile of forest debris. Branches stacked up, moss, some bones scattered around. But as I got closer, the pattern emerged. It wasn't random. It was built, symmetrical, intentional. 3 long pine limbs tied together in a triangle and leaned upright like a primitive monument. Inside the frame, smaller branches woven like lattice. At the center, a deer skull hung from a piece of rope made of braided vine. Its antlers were chipped. One eye socket cracked. Dried leaves were stuffed into its mouth. There was something sacred about it, but not in a way that felt safe. More like walking into a chapel after something unholy had prayed there. The air was heavy, not just with moisture, but with intention. Like the place had been made to be found, but only by someone who wasn't supposed to talk about it afterward. I didn't touch it. Didn't even get too close, but I remember backing away and realizing I hadn't heard the singing stop. It just faded under my awareness, like it had slipped inside my head and was still playing quietly behind everything else. I turned to head back to camp and froze. My pack had been moved. It was subtle, just enough to let me know someone had been there. The straps weren't lying the same. The zipper was halfway open, nothing spilled, nothing obvious. But I know the way I pack. I'm a creature of habit. Always zip halfway, fold once, clip the carabiner on the left side. It was unclipped. I knelt down, hands trembling now, and opened the pack fully. My water bottle was untouched. My food was still there. But the first aid kit had been opened, not ransacked. Opened, examined. One roll of gauze slightly unwound. The emergency blanket unrolled, then neatly folded again, wrong but carefully. The GPS was sitting on top, face up, and the battery had been removed. I didn't hear footsteps, I didn't hear a thing. But I knew whatever had come into my camp that night wasn't hungry. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't curious like a bear or a raccoon. It was smart. It had fingers. It knew what it was looking for. And that's when I noticed the photo was gone. The picture of Evelyn. It had been tucked in the mesh sleeve inside the inner pouch. I kept it there like a charm, like a reminder. I hadn't taken it out since the first night, but now, gone. Nothing else missing, nothing broken. Just that photo. That was the part that shook me more than the singing, more than the footprints, more than the guttural whistle I'd heard on the ridge. It had seen her and taken her, or maybe it had taken the piece of me that still belonged to her. I sat there for a long time, flashlight pointed at the ground, watching the beam blur in the mist. The fire behind me was down to embers. My breath made ghosts in the cold. I wanted to yell, to scream into the dark, to demand it bring her back. But something told me not to. Something told me that whatever had taken that photo wasn't cruel. It was deliberate. It was communicating, in its own way. The woods shifted again. Not the trees, the feeling, like the forest was waking up. Not with birdsong, not with rustling branches. With attention, I looked up toward the treetops. Fog poured down like smoke from a vent. And for just a moment in the haze, I saw eyes. 2 of them, set far apart, reflecting amber light that wasn't there. They blinked once, then vanished. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs felt locked, like if I stood, I'd break some invisible thread that had been tying me to something bigger than me this whole time. Eventually, I made it back into the tent, sat with my back to the entrance, rifle across my lap, recorder in my hand. But I didn't hit play. I didn't want to hear it again, not tonight. I lay awake until dawn, listening. Not for movement, but for music, 'cause that's what it was now. A song, not meant for me but meant to be heard, and the forest had chosen me as its witness. Something pulled me east that morning. Not curiosity, not even fear. It was deeper than that, like gravity but colder. Like the feeling you get when you walk into a room and know someone was just talking about you. The trees looked the same. The sky was the same dead gray. But the air had changed. Thick, still. Like even the wind had stepped back to watch what came next. I packed light again. Left everything except the essentials. My Remington, the recorder, a flashlight, matches. And the photo, no, scratch that. The photo was gone. Still gone. I checked the pack 5 more times since the night before, like it might magically reappear if I just believed hard enough. But no, it had been taken, or offered, or stolen. I still don't know which. I followed the slope toward the far ridge. That part of the forest hadn't seen boot prints in a long time. Maybe ever. No logging roads, no trash, not even deer scat. Just moss thick as a sponge and stones like bones underfoot. The kind of place that doesn't care if you're there, doesn't even notice you unless you push too far. I pushed anyway. It took me 3 hours to find the entrance. It wasn't marked. Not exactly. You had to be looking wrong to see it. A sliver in the rock face, half hidden behind hanging vines and a curtain of damp ferns. The earth around it sloped inward like a mouth caught mid-breath. The moment I saw it, my skin went cold. The kind of cold that isn't from weather. The kind that comes from your marrow remembering something you've never lived. The flashlight clicked on with a soft hum. The beam cut through the green like a scalpel. I stepped forward, ducking low, my rifle tight against my chest. The air inside was different, warmer somehow. Still damp, but with an undertone of musk and stone. I expected rot, animal, death, but instead, it smelled like dirt after rain. Ancient, clean, like the woods themselves had a heartbeat. The tunnel was narrow at first. Rough walls, clawed here and there but smoothed by time. No signs of modern life, no graffiti, no rappers. Just silence, the kind that throbbed in my ears like pressure from altitude. Then the chamber opened. It was bigger than I expected. 30 feet wide, maybe more. The flashlight caught the shimmer of water pooled against the far wall. Condensation dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing like a slow clock. But that wasn't what stopped me cold. It was what was on the walls. Bones, dozens, maybe hundreds. All woven into the stone with vines and branches, some bleached white, others still covered in hair. Not thrown, not piled, arranged, spirals, lines, arcs like constellations. I saw deer, elk, bear. Something that looked canine but too large, and human. At least one, a femur. Females maybe. Old. Hard to tell. I didn't go closer. The center of the room was a kind of altar, not raised but cleared, dirt swept smooth, and in the middle an object. I stepped closer, breath tight, heart like a snare drum under my ribs. It was the photo, my wife's photo, but it wasn't whole. It had been pressed flat into a piece of bark, secured at the corners with small twigs bent like pins. Around it, fresh leaves, green, not yet dried. Arranged in a circle, broken only at the top. Something had been placed there deliberately, like a symbol or offering. A shape I didn't recognize. A curve intersecting 3 lines carved into the soil with a single finger or claw. I dropped to one knee. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. I was sad. That photo didn't feel stolen now. It felt understood, revered, like someone had taken a piece of my memory and tried to make it sacred, not mocked, not used against me, just seen. That's when I heard it again. The breathing, not mine, not close, but from deeper within the cave. I turned, light sweeping past the bones, past the water, to a second tunnel I hadn't noticed. Wider, sloping downward. The air from it was warmer, thicker, like something alive lived below. And something did, because eyes blinked back at me, amber, reflective, set wide apart, too high for a man, too far for an animal, just standing there watching. And then it stepped forward. First the outline, broad shoulders, thick arms, legs like tree trunks, covered in dark, wet hair matted with moss and dirt. Not wild, not like a bear, cleaner, more structured. The chest moved with slow, steady breaths. The hands hung at its sides, long fingers curled inward. And the face, God help me, the face. It wasn't fully human, but it wasn't beast either. Eyes set deep, brow heavy, the nose flattened, the mouth closed. But it wasn't snarling, wasn't angry. It looked puzzled, curious. It looked at me the way you look at a puzzle you're almost afraid to finish. We didn't move for maybe 10 seconds, maybe a lifetime. Then it grunted, low, deep. It echoed off the stone like thunder wrapped in velvet, and from behind it, deeper in the tunnel, came an answer. Another voice, similar, not identical, softer. Then another, then another. I raised the rifle slowly, not to fire, just to hold it. My arms weren't shaking from fear. They were shaking from awe, from standing in front of something I wasn't supposed to ever see, and knowing it had let me. The creature stepped aside, just one step, but it meant something. A warning maybe, a gesture, or maybe just a test, an invitation to go deeper or a command to leave. I didn't know which. That's when I saw it. Hanging behind it on a frame of woven limbs and rope, my wife's photo again. But different. This one had been altered. The image faded slightly, worn at the edges, but someone or something had painted around her eyes, with ash or dirt or something darker. A ring, like a mask, like a rite. The vines around it weren't loose, they were tight, patterned, braided, a display, a ritual. I backed away, not because I was afraid, but because I understood. This wasn't a cave, it was a cathedral, and whatever lived inside wasn't alone. I backed away from that frame like it was a living thing. I don't even remember how many steps I took before I turned. Just that my boots felt heavier than before, the air thicker, my pulse louder. But I wasn't running yet. Not yet. Not until I passed the wide-eyed thing that had stepped aside to let me in. It stood motionless at the edge of the chamber, its chest rising slow and steady like it didn't care whether I stayed or fled. It just watched. I looked at it one more time, really looked. The skin beneath the fur wasn't gray like I thought. It had color, warm, reddish-brown maybe, and the eyes. They didn't glare, they absorbed, deep, ancient, unblinking. I didn't speak, there was no point. Whatever I had to say wouldn't matter, not here. So I turned, walked fast but careful, the beam of the flashlight bouncing with each step. The walls narrowed again behind me, rock brushing against my shoulder blades. Cold water dripped onto my neck like ice fingers. My boots slapped the ground louder now, like even the cave wanted me gone. The entrance came into view, fainter than I remembered. Just a sliver of daylight filtered through the vines. But I wasn't alone. The moment I stepped into the clearing again, I felt it. Pressure, movement in the trees, not fast, not loud, but many. Branches shifting above, leaves trembling though there was no wind, shapes moving between trunks like ghosts behind curtains. I started walking, rifle in one hand, light in the other, head up, steady. Then the sound started. Not a growl, not the song. Drumming, soft, rhythmic, like wood knocking against wood. One beat, then two, then silence, then again, closer, from another direction, then behind me, then ahead. It was surrounding me in rhythm, and the rhythm wasn't random, it was herding. I picked up speed, not running, not yet, but fast enough that my breath came shorter. The trail I'd taken in had already started to vanish, like the forest was trying to erase it. moss folding over my footprints, branches bending where they hadn't been bent before. I kept my eyes forward. I didn't want to look back. I knew if I did, I'd stop. Then I heard it, a footstep that wasn't mine, close, heavy. Followed by another, slower and more deliberate, not running after me, just matching me, one step for every three of mine, not hunting, not chasing, escorting. I kept going. The brush got thicker. I started cutting through it now, not caring if I made noise. The fog was back, low, cold, wrapping around my calves and pulling me down with every stride. I reached the ridge before I even realized I was climbing. My legs burned, my chest was tight, but I didn't stop. Then I saw it, a shape ahead. At first I thought it was just another tree, tall, wide, still. But then it moved. It stepped into my path, maybe 30 feet out. Massive, solid. The same figure I'd seen in the cave. Or maybe not the same. This one looked older, grayer. The shoulders broader, the face even less human. It didn't growl, didn't lunge. It raised its hand, not like a threat, or like a command. Stop! I did. Every instinct I had told me to lower my gaze, but I didn't. I looked right at it. Its head tilted slightly, not curious, not angry, just acknowledging. It held that gesture a moment longer, then pointed. To the right, downhill, away from the den, away from them. I took a step in that direction and it didn't move. I took another, still nothing. By the third step I knew I wasn't being hunted. I was being exiled. I turned and followed the new path. It wasn't one I recognized. Narrow, steep, the kind of slope that tears up your knees and throws you into rocks if you misstep. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. About halfway down I slipped. The mud was loose from the rain. My foot gave out and before I could brace myself I was sliding. Gravel cutting my arms, roots scraping my ribs. The flashlight flung from my hand and spinning into the brush. I hit hard, rolled once, twice, then everything went black. When I woke, it was still light out. The pain came first. A sharp ache in my left shoulder, then my knee, then my ribs. I sucked in air, slow, and tasted blood. My vision swam. I tried to sit up but had to roll to one side first. The world tilted around me, my ears rang. Then I noticed something. Under my head, propped there like a crude pillow, was a branch. Not broken, placed, forked at the end, bent gently under my skull like someone had cushioned the fall. I reached for the rifle. It was there, still strapped to me. I looked around. No tracks, no figures, just trees, fog, silence, but not the same silence as before. This one was different. Forgiving, I limped my way back to the old trail. It took most of the afternoon. The forest didn't fight me this time. It just let me pass. No drums, no whispers, no watchers in the trees. When I reached my tent, it was still there, untouched. Everything exactly as I'd left it, except one thing. Inside, tucked gently into the folds of my sleeping bag, was a sprig of pine, still damp, still fragrant, tied with a single thread of bark. I didn't touch it. I just sat there, breathing slow, trying to make sense of what I'd been spared from, or maybe what I'd been trusted with. Because the truth is, they could have killed me a dozen times over, back in that den, on that slope, even when I lay unconscious and broken in the dirt. But they didn't. They let me go, not out of mercy, out of decision. A boundary had been crossed and they had drawn it back. And now, I was on the other side of it. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear. At least not the kind that claws your chest in the dark. But from something quieter, heavier. A silence inside me that hadn't been there before. Like the woods had left their mark on my blood. Like something had folded itself into me. I stayed curled in my sleeping bag back against the tent wall, listening to the breeze slide through the trees like a breath I didn't trust. But the woods didn't speak again. No whistles, no drumming. No eyes blinking in the dark. Just wind, And when dawn finally broke, it wasn't loud. It was soft, like the mountain was easing me out, not pushing me. I took my time packing, every motion slower than it needed to be. I rolled my tent like it was sacred. I wrapped the pine sprig carefully in the corner of my flannel. I never told anyone this part, but I whispered thank you out loud. Into the fog, into the dirt, into the nothing. It wasn't for a god, it wasn't for myself. It was for them. It took me half the day to hike back to the truck. The forest never looked the same again. Same trees, same trail, same bends in the river, but it felt older now. Quieter. Not dead, just aware. Like it remembered me. Like it had decided not to erase me. When I reached the gravel road, I didn't look back. The drive into town was a blur. Trees flashing past like ribs of a great body. The road humming under the tires like a warning not to speak. But as soon as I saw the first mailbox, the gas station sign half lit in the distance, something in my chest loosened. And the strangest thing happened. I cried. Not loud, not broken. Just tears, quiet and steady, slipping down my cheeks while I stared at the road ahead. No one would believe me, I knew that. But I had proof. The camera had been around my neck the whole time. I hadn't dared pull it out in the cave. But it had been on during the hike out. I hadn't remembered snapping the photo, not exactly. But I'd pressed the shutter out of habit, out of instinct, when I crossed the ridge. Back home, I loaded the card, and there it was. One frame, one clear centered shot, a tall, broad figure standing between two fir trees mid-step, turning toward me. Eyes caught by the lens, not blurred, not shadowed, not a trick of light or a smear of branches. It was looking right at me, and it was real. I zoomed in, the face, the brow, the hands, the muscles beneath the fur. You could count the fingers, you could see the dirt on its shoulder, the pattern in its chest hair, the scar along its cheekbone. It wasn't a man, but it wasn't a beast either. It was something else. I printed the photo, locked it in a drawer. Then I checked the recorder. I hadn't played it since the cave. I didn't want to, honestly. But something made me do it anyway. I pressed play and the speaker filled with static. Then breath, then something deeper. The song. That low whale belly sound climbing and falling like the forest was humming to itself. Then the knock, the rhythm. You could hear it circling. You could feel the shape of it. And then underneath it all, a voice, not words, but the shape of them, mimicked, practiced, like something trying to remember how a mouth works. One syllable stretched long, then quiet, then a breath, not mine. Then it stopped. The hairs on my arms stood straight. That night I cast the footprints in plaster. I had taken a few photos, but I needed something real, something I could touch. It took hours, and I nearly ruined the first one, but the second held. You could see the grooves in the toes, the arch, the pressure from the heel. I kept it sealed in a plastic tub under my bed for months. The hair came next. It was on my coat, stuck in the fabric near the collar. Coarse, black, thick as wire, but softer at the tip. I had it analyzed through a friend who knew a guy at a lab. The results didn't make sense. Part primate, part human, but with markers that didn't match either. The tech said it had properties of both, but no origin they could assign it to. No matches in the system, just an anomaly, a shrug in report form. The photo, the audio, the plaster, the hair. Together they didn't prove anything, but separately they whispered the same thing. Something's out there. I posted the story 2 weeks later, on a forum for cryptid reports somewhere between the alien hunters and the Bigfoot chasers. I didn't use my name, just wrote it like it was fiction, left out the exact location, kept some of the details close, but I included enough to know the truth had weight, and people responded. Dozens at first, then hundreds. Some told me I was crazy. Others told me they'd seen it too. Not the same one, but close. A rancher in Kentucky, a hiker in northern Georgia. A woman from Tennessee who swore her grandfather told stories that matched mine word for word. And then there were the others. Researchers. A team from Oregon reached out, then one from upstate New York. They weren't scientists in the traditional sense, but they had gear, tracking systems, remote cameras. I let them come with me, twice, took them to the outer trails, showed them where the fog gets too thick, where the air gets too still. They found things, tree structures, markings, dens, but never the creature. Not once. It was gone, or maybe it was watching from just outside the lens like it always had. Like it knew exactly what to show and what to withhold. The last time I went up there was with a biologist from Montana. A quiet man, soft-spoken, who didn't laugh at the photo when I showed him. Didn't call it fake. He just stared. Then he told me something I'll never forget. "There's an old saying in these mountains," he said. "The people of the hills don't harm unless harmed. They're not beasts, they're boundaries." I nodded, because I'd seen it. And that was the thing about all the evidence I collected. It didn't lead to answers. It didn't point to science or legend. It just hung there between the two. A question wrapped in a heartbeat, a boundary drawn in moss and silence. Some nights I take the photo back out. I don't look at it long, just enough to remember what the truth felt like. Heavy, sacred, alive. It's been over a year now. Some days I still smell that pine fog in my lungs before I even sit up in bed, not in a bad way. Not like a dream you want to shake off, but like memory. Moist, heavy, patient. Like it waits just outside the window, sitting with its back to the house, never asking to come in, just there. Watching. I never moved away. Folks thought I would after the story got out. After the forum thread exploded, after the video clip someone leaked from my recorder got shared, twisted, picked apart. They expected I'd pack up, go west, vanish from the eyes of the curious, but I didn't. I couldn't. That land raised me, and something in me knew, once you're marked by that forest, there's nowhere else you're truly yourself again. But I don't hike as deep anymore. Not out of fear, not exactly. It's something closer to reverence. I still go to the edge of the trail every now and then, where the gravel gives way to moss and the sun doesn't quite reach through the hemlocks. I'll stop there, just long enough to listen. Not for proof, not for photos, just to hear if the woods still breathe in that way. And they do. Not loud, not always, but if you stand still long enough, the song comes back. That low hum beneath the silence, like a hymn whispered through stone. The dreams never left either. But they aren't nightmares. It took me a while to realize that. At first, I thought I was haunted. I'd wake in the middle of the night, cold sweat soaking the pillow, her photo pressed to my chest like it had crawled out of the drawer on its own. I'd swear I'd heard breathing, heavy and slow, just beyond the walls of the house. My dog, Duke, would lift his head but never bark, just stare at the door, ears up, alert but calm, like he knew. But it wasn't fear in the dream. It was presence, always the same. I'm back in the cave, the big one, the cathedral under the mountain, the walls lit from nowhere, the bones glowing like constellations. And I'm not alone. They're all around me, not watching, standing, still, present. And the biggest one, the first one I saw, reaches forward not to grab, not to threaten, just to place something in my hands. It's always the same thing. A circle of woven grass, a pine sprig, a single word I can't hear but always understand. Remember, I didn't know what it meant at first. I kept looking for signs, for answers. I wrote every night for months, pages and pages. I recorded myself talking through the whole thing dozens of times, trying to pin down something that wouldn't stay still in my head. But it always came back to that word, remember. So I did. I started reading again. Old stories, the ones from before the roads, the ones carved into trees and whispered beside fires that burned low. I talked to elders, Cherokee, Shawnee, even some descendants of the Melungeons tucked away in mountain hollows who still keep their own lore, and they all said the same thing in their own way. They're not beasts, they're watchers, boundaries between what we are and what we forget. Some called them keepers, others called them lost brothers. A few refused to name them at all. Said naming was the first mistake, that once something has a name, it can be hunted, tracked, claimed. I stopped calling it Bigfoot. It didn't feel right anymore. It felt small, comic bookish. A name made by people who needed everything to fit inside a cage. So I called it what the forest taught me, shadow of the threshold. Is it? Because that's what it is. Not a monster, not a man. Something between. Something meant to keep things apart, and maybe to remind us that we used to belong to the wild too. I sent off a hair sample again, this time through a private lab upstate. Paid more than I care to admit just to see if the data lined up. It did. Same anomalies, same strands of primate and human and something else. The tech who called me said, half joking, if I didn't know better, I'd say this was a living fossil. He didn't know how close he was. I thanked him, filed the report away, and haven't opened it since. Because the proof wasn't the point anymore. The proof was just what I thought I needed when I was still trying to make the world make sense. But the truth never needed permission to exist. It just does. I started writing again. Not for the forums, not for the researchers, for myself, for Evelyn. For the old part of me that needed to believe there was more than loss. That something ancient could still care, that something unknown could still show mercy. I wrote about the way the light changes when you step off the trail, about the songs, about the way it looked at me, not like prey, not like threat, but like witness. I write about that more than anything, that feeling of being seen by something that didn't need to see me, and choosing not to strike, but to spare. One morning late in fall, I walked out onto the porch. The fog was heavy again, the kind that rolls low, curls around the fence posts, softens the world. I sipped my coffee and listened. Birds were chirping, nothing loud, but they were back. Chickadees, sparrows, even a whippoorwill the night before. I hadn't heard birds the whole week I'd been in those woods, and now here they were. I set the cup down, stepped off the porch. And for the first time in a year, I walked into the trees without fear, not to chase, not to prove, just to remember. And somewhere in the hush between branches where sunlight can't quite reach, I felt it again. The shadow, not looming, not stalking, just there, still watching, still keeping. And as I stepped beneath the canopy, heart calm, eyes open, I whispered the only thing that felt right. I know. And I swear, the forest breathed back. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't the ones that shout. They're the ones that sit with you in silence. The ones that walk beside you quietly long after the lights fade. What we just shared wasn't about answers. It wasn't about proving something exists or doesn't. It was about witnessing. About standing face to face with the unknown and choosing not to conquer it, but to understand it. There are places in this world that still hold secrets. Places where the trees are older than memory, where the wind speaks in riddles and where the silence carries weight. And sometimes, if you're quiet enough, if you're humble enough, you realize you're not the only one doing the watching. This story was never about monsters. It was about boundaries, about reverence, about letting go of control and allowing mystery to simply be. Because not everything wild is meant to be tamed. Not every shadow is a threat. Sometimes what we fear is just what we don't yet understand. And sometimes mercy exists in the unlikeliest places. What we fear may be watching us not with hate but with restraint. What we run from may have already chosen not to harm us. And what we've forgotten may still remember us. At its heart, this was a story about respect. About recognizing the quiet wisdom in ancient things, about knowing when to step back and when to simply listen. Maybe we don't need to label everything. Maybe the most sacred things are the ones we leave unnamed. So if something in this story stirred something in you, a memory, a question, a quiet part of yourself you don't visit often, then maybe it wasn't just a tale. Maybe it was a reminder that wonder still exists, that reverence still matters, that some silences deserve to remain untouched. And maybe, just maybe, the unknown isn't something to fear, but something to honor. Thank you for being here, for walking with me through the mist, for opening your heart to the mystery. If this story moved you in any way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to walk beside me through more stories like this, haunting, human, and quietly unforgettable, don't forget to subscribe, follow, and share this journey with others. There are still many shadows worth chasing, and some worth simply standing beside. Until next time.